I think that's working now. Okay, well, welcome to this session. This is a session which is about regenerative design and bioregions, and I and my colleague Oscar Gussinyer, who is in Catalonia, are going to be leading this together. What we want to do here is really unpack what we mean by regeneration and regenerative design for a bioregion. There's been a lot of requests in the summit for understanding how to do things, kind of roadmaps or thinking frameworks or getting clear about what we mean about things. So this is a session in which we're going to do that, and we're going to ground this experience that we're offering you in the bioregions of South Devon and Garrotxa in Catalonia, where Oscar is. So we're going to introduce ourselves by talking about our bioregions and our work. And then we're going to say more about regenerative design, what we mean by that and how we're working with that, and why our journeys in our bioregions and the work we've done so far have brought us to this point of realizing that we needed the thinking and design framework for bioregions that would enable us to understand how to work in a collaborative design process in a bioregion, i.e. at landscape scale, particularly focusing on data and governance. So I'm going to hand over to Oscar to introduce himself and his bioregion, and then I'll follow him. And after we've done all the introductions and all the talking, we're going to have a 10-minute break at about 10 minutes to the hour, and then come back for a further hour in which we go through the framework, and we'll share the framework with you. It's on a mural, and we're all going to go through it together. We'll kind of walk through all the 8 stages of the value adding process together, and then we'll reflect on what the experience has been like and what we've learned from it. Oscar, over to you.
Thank you, Isabel. Then yes, just a brief introduction. Me and my partner Eric Zarete, Peruvian Canadian, we worked for several years in war zones, and as a lot of people says that war zones are a place that there's a lot of innovation in technology. There's also a lot of innovation in peace, and with the different skills that we got in working in zones and war zones, we go back to my place where I was born, and we start to living there. And our purpose was to actually be able to use those skills to generate change. Our first purpose was to actually create a co-op that was capable of using regenerative approach and systemic approach like Donella Meadows and stuff, to see if 2 people starting a co-op would be able to generate a significant, objective, measurable change in between 5 and 10 years in a region that there is 60,000 people living. Then last year, that we did 5 years, and we actually did generate a strategic plan for the whole region, where our goal was to reach a critical mass amount of people interacting with the process, and we did. We reached that critical mass. We got to 11,500 people. And the strategic plan was based on a regenerative approach that also we have been creating and co-creating with Isabel for 2-3 years, and that we're implementing in this bioregion. At this point, we're working also at the level of the Girona province, that it's bigger. It's 750,000 people, and right now, what we're doing is trying to open up and scale this process. And with the strategic plan that we created, that it's linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, just because it's a framework that it's universal and it's anything can be regenerated. Like maybe some people think that the SDGs are not, they don't bring enough value, but I think that anything can be regenerated and we can bring value to anything. Then from this perspective, we generated 21 hubs with 21 challenges, and now we're focusing on a decentralized governance structure for the whole bioregion that it's based on complexity and that it's capable of implementing the strategic plan to 2030. Internalizing all the externalities, all the negative externalities that we found out during the strategic plan. Then we're more or less in that process. At the same time, we're also working with transformative economies ecosystem that we have been engaging at this point 60 companies, small companies, rooted companies, that co-ops mostly, that are significant enough to be able to start a change, not significant enough to be able to change the economy of the region, but we're working. Then I don't know if that's, I guess that's good enough for now. Then I'm going to pass it back to you, Isabel.
Thank you, Oscar. So Oscar and I met, I think, about 5 years ago, because we were both studying with Regenesis. We were studying regenerative development and design. And we realized that we were working at similar scales on similar issues probably about 3 years ago. So we've been talking and working together since then. We've never actually met. We're going to work. We are going to meet this weekend, which is very exciting. So how did we in South Devon come to understand the importance of working at the scale that we're going to be describing to you? It's very clear from hearing Oscar speak that he's come into bioregions and that his organization, Resilience.Earth, has come into bioregional working through working with local government. So governance was the way in, and that's really their expertise. Our way in was much more to do with natural systems, particularly water. So we came into our bioregion wanting to understand how to work with whole watersheds or the whole water system, i.e. you've got a big water company, you've got communities, you've got businesses, you've got many stakeholders in a watershed. How do you work with all of them? So that's kind of been the bone that we've been chewing on and getting to understand better. But we also work with this interface between natural systems and human systems. So human created systems like health systems and transport or water distribution systems. And we're particularly interested in how those friction places, and they've become friction places because climate change and geosystems on the move are driving that kind of disconnect, if you like, between how human systems and human infrastructure have been operating for centuries and what the reality is of what's happening to our natural systems. And that includes things like biodiversity or land use or soil or water or any of those different things. But regardless of the entry point into bioregional working, most of us end up in the same place sooner or later. So once you've done your mapping, and we map through doing a learning journey around our bioregion, and once you've really got to know all the people who are doing regenerative work or are driving the green shoots of resilience in a place, and once you've got to really understand how your local economy functions and what the story of your place is, and there are lots of ways in which you can understand story of place, but Oscar and I both trained in the regenerative practice of creating a story of place, which is a way to give your place agency and understand how your place functions, not just internally, but in relationship to other places. So in relationship to the surrounding land or in relationship to the nation and what role it plays in those relationships. So having done all that, you still get to a point of thinking, well, how do we do this change operation that we're engaged in? How do we really engage local people? How do we get local stakeholders to see the importance of working in a collaborative way? And how do we create a shared vision that we all want to work towards? And for Oscar and myself, having had many hours of conversations together, we're both pretty convinced that governance is key, that bringing civil society into some kind of governance responsibility or agency either alongside existing governance structures or effectively creating some kind of parallel governance structure is where we need to go if change is really going to happen. So agency, as I said in the conversation yesterday with Daniel Christian Wahl, it's super important that we find ways to release the agency of ordinary people and the agency of the place. And that's really what regenerative design is about. And we also, Oscar and I have been talking about data and the importance of having some kind of data headquarters for your bioregion. And data is not just about cold data or quantitative data, it's also about warm data, qualitative data. And so it includes things like storytelling, it includes lived experience. How do we value and recognize the data, the information that's generated by communities on their own territory, where they know the place best? So communities that understand why flooding is happening more often, because they can see how the water runs a lot across the landscape, for instance. And so data, as Oscar described it once, is like the fluid that enables governance to happen. Without data, governance is stuck because you constantly need to be in touch with your place and understanding how it's functioning and be able to get those feedback loops so you can really check in and understand whether the actions that you're taking are effective or not. So Oscar and I both ended up in the same place, wanting to do the same thing. And we're going to reveal to you how we're thinking about that through the framework that we'll share after the break. But before we do that, we really want to unpack what we mean by regenerative, because there's been a lot of talk about regeneration of bioregions and regenerative ways of working in this summit. And we just want to kind of give you our own take on what we mean by that. So Oscar, I'm going to hand over to you to start us off.
Okay, then when we talk about, as Isabel was expressing it, when we talk about the need for data and governance, there's like, we're specialized in rural areas, and because we think that the change, it's happening there. It's way more difficult that it happens in the cities. Then when you're with the with data, what brings it's like, if we're capable of not going to something that it's completely objective, but that it's a dialogue happening and that it includes disagreement in this technical background, no, that Isabel calls it. With this data, what we can do is to evolve governance. Like what we need in our countries right now is ideologies, because ideologies, what they do, it's to interpret what's going on in the region, filtered by some kind of political beliefs that helps these people to be able to make decisions that in a way are kind of consistent. But in reality, what we're talking about is that there's not a real grasp of what's going on in the bioregion, and we don't know which are the negative externalities that we're imposing in our community and in our natural ecosystem. Then in the moment that we have that, there's no more need for ideologies, and the ideologies can be something that it's much more fluid, not so rigid as we have it these days, but something that just flows around and that generates disagreements, that it's a basic, like one of the main parts that working at bioregional level, in difference of working in corporations, it's disagreement. Like in a corporation, you have a specific purpose and you can actually have a certain agreement of consensus of where do you want to go. In a community, you're never going to have that. That's impossible. That's just not going to happen. And that's one of the main sources and the richness of the community, that disagreement, because that's the engine, the heart that moves the whole community forward. Then once we're capable of actually being able to monitor what's actually going on, we're capable of knowing which are the externalities that we are generating. And in that moment, we can internalize those externalities, or we can externalize positive externalities. And in a base, when we're talking at bioregional level, that's regeneration. If we would be capable of that all the cycles happening inside a community and in a bioregion are generating positive externalities to the community itself and the natural ecosystem, we would be a regenerative community. Up to the moment that we're capable of doing that, we won't be a regenerative ecosystem community.
So when we talk about regeneration in regenerative development and design, which is the shared language, I suppose, that Oscar and I both speak, we are talking about not doing things to places or communities, but releasing the potential of places and communities to regenerate themselves. So when we come in to work in a landscape or a bioregion, one of our first roles is to understand who that bioregion is, how does it function, how do the people in that place get shaped by that bioregion and how they're shaping it, and what are the issues that that place is confronting. So whether it's to do with farming no longer being subsidized up in the hill country, for instance, or whether it's to do with climate change and communities that live on the coast, just inland of shingle beaches that are getting washed away every time there's a major storm, so that they lose their coastal road, how they're coping with that retreat from the sea. So what a regenerative practitioner brings into those situations is the capacity to listen very deeply to what people are saying about is happening in their place, to understand where the energy is for thinking into a different kind of scenario, into a scenario which is a scenario of change, which often does involve conflict, as Oscar has talked about, but ultimately is leading to a goal that people can agree on, that people can find some kind of hope within, and that they have a spark of inspiration and activation in order to be able to get there. So that the regenerative practitioner is working in a landscape in a way that is enabling the people of that place to see what the possibilities are, to believe in themselves, and to go the next step, to work together in a process that we call mutual collaboration or mutual evolution. So people helping each other, learning from each other, saying, look, we're doing this over here. We'd love to come and see what you're doing over there. Maybe we can learn from each other and exchange. So there's that kind of growth that is enabled, that evolutionary growth. So at the back of our minds, we keep on thinking about how life itself operates. And life itself is always moving towards vitality, viability, and the capacity to evolve. And how we release that vitality, how we ensure that that vitality is met by a viability, i.e. it's supported, it's resourced, it doesn't just kind of peter out, it doesn't just die away. And then the capacity to evolve is constantly being set in motion, or it's just a kind of ongoing motion that sustains itself towards this goal that everybody is agreed that they want. So interestingly, and maybe not surprisingly, when we did the Devon Donut, which was a group process with over 170 people, and we met online on Zoom every fortnight for a year, we very specifically said in the middle of the donut, I don't know if any of you understand the donut visual, what it looks like, but you've got two rings basically, and on the outer ring you've got the Stockholm Resilience Center's planetary boundaries, and on the inner ring you've got many of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is called the social threshold below which you don't want to fall. But in Devon, in the middle of that inner circle, we put the space for revitalization. And constantly we were thinking about, what does that space look like? What are we moving towards here? What are the pathways to action that would help us move towards that space? So we always had a goal in mind. And without that shared goal in mind, I think it's very difficult to work in a regenerative way. So I'm going to pause there because we now have some time to hear from all of you. We'd love to hear from you in what ways you're working with landscapes, where perhaps you're getting stuck or tripped up, and what you'd like to learn from this session. And we'll try and design that into the second half of the session. And you can very welcome to write in the chat or just put your hand up and ask a question. We've got about 20 minutes to do this. Michael. You're muted, Michael.
Hello. Thank you. I'll just toss out a question that I'm experiencing as of yesterday and use it as a springboard. So I am working with a group of people that are virtually distributed, a series of activists that all care about regeneration, but as I say, are literally on different continents. And it's a small group of individuals, all of whom are highly entrepreneurial and motivated. And not yet aligned. They are all committed to a vision that they have in their head, not to a coordinated shared vision. And so to act bioregionally involves a coming together, right? Evolving from a me into a we, and the journey of walking into what does it mean for me to align what I care about into a larger context. It can be that somebody says, here, I've got a donut framework, or I've got a this or a that. There's how to, any lessons learned about facilitating the migration from my vision to our vision. And I'll share one, the point of entry that we were using, and then any thoughts, reactions. So the invitation to this group was because there's a certain way of raising funds, open collective, that that was like, what might happen if we joined forces to coordinate how we attract resources so that we can act together, and that may not have been the best way to go about it, but we already thought we were aligned, and the moment the money came into the picture, it was like, so it's a question of how do you herd cats and get people onto a single meow when people are doing what people will do. I hope that's a useful question.
Yeah, good question. Oscar, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I think that in working on bioregions means that regeneration needs to evolve its leadership capacities. And instead of taking like a role at the front, it needs to take a leadership role at the back. And where we're talking about anything, because when you talk with unit bioregion, you can talk about anything: unions, ecology, work, co-ops, like commercial, anything. It's really important to look for the voices that doesn't have privilege and put them in the middle, in the center. Like what I'm meaning is that I think, Michael, that the most important thing, it's not to have maybe a vision of where we need to go, but to sustain the framework of regeneration at the back and guiding the different voices that has the real knowledge of the bioregion and give them a space to be expressed. If we really want a resilient future, we need the non-privileged voices to be able to speak, because they're really specific sensors that it's helping us to actually move forward. When Isabel was saying, for example, farming could be like a big issue in a bioregion. Sure, and also maybe a farmer had a kid, descendant, that it's trans. And then we're starting to look, how does a trans person understands farming? Because probably it's a completely different way. Like maybe we could give the voice to that person, because that way of thinking, it's going to be completely disruptive and probably bring up much more information and how we can evolve. Like the voices of the edges are actually the ones that are capable of evolving our system. No, the ones that sustaining the power are not capable of evolving the system because they hold too much and because they already expressing what's happening. then I think that the main thing is being able to sustain a meta process where giving a space for the people to express themselves. I don't know if that helps.
And a clarification question from Killian: you're not all in the same bioregion. You don't have that shared space. So you're not grounded in a sense by land. I mean, that's a primary difference between what you're describing and what bioregional working is about. But finding that shared goal, I think that's incredibly important, to find the shared goal and then work backwards from that.
Yep, thank you. By the way, these were all social justice oriented people, so the vocabulary of environmentalism wasn't necessary. So whether it was trans or immigration or and the question was, how would thinking about bioregionalism help and influence or expand what you're doing? And it was just a reality check about, okay, there is this harmonizing effort that needs to go on. And thank you.
Yeah, that's a very relevant question.
Isabel, there's a question for you from
Yeah,
Miguel Piñón.
Miguel, I saw that. How did you reconcile the donut economics frameworks, which come from a siloed and fragmentary science, with the regenerative development? Very good question. So yes, of course, it is siloed, and that's a main critique of the donut. However, the donut does do this extraordinary job in a visual graphic of bringing together economy and ecology in a way that people maybe haven't often thought about that before. So you could say that while it's siloed in the sense that it's separated out into these domains within the rings of the donut, it does also give you capacity to see everything in one go and understand the connections between them. So how did we work with the donut in a regenerative way? It gave us a way to think about our place, which brought together all the systems like freshwater or marine health or forestry or biodiversity, together with the human systems like transport, like health, like income and work, like education, and to understand how they played off each other. So it did give us a very useful framework for kind of bringing everything into the room and making it very relevant to the people on the ground. So the people who came to our co-design sessions for the Devon Donut, I came from all sorts of backgrounds. You know, they were working in housing, they were working in health, they were working in local government, they were local communities, there were NGOs of all kinds, and they were all united by this desire, this realization that the future of Devon depended on us taking a much more regenerative approach to how we tackle all the issues. So how did we weave in regeneration? One of the things we did was to make our sessions really upbeat and regenerative. So people who came to them at the end of their working day for a bit of uplift and hope and connecting with like-minded people. And that in itself created the atmosphere in which we were able to start to think regeneratively, to think, how can we do this? To think not just how can we do this, but we can do this, and this is what we're going to do. So in creating a scenario for every different sector, so a scenario for income and work, or a scenario for marine health, which we felt was a scenario that could be changed by both policymakers and civil society working together, we were working into that space of potential. We were saying, look, if we can move the needle on this particular scenario, whether it's bottom trawling out of our big fishing harbor of Brixham, or whether it's young people feeling that they've got political voice, if we can shift that, that can shift that whole domain. So we're going to find pathways to action to work on that scenario. And that was how we work regeneratively, because we were constantly working into potential. And when you work with regeneration and kind of regeneration frameworks, you're not really looking for problems to solve so much as saying, let's look for the potential here. Let's see how we can unleash the potential and make it possible to inspire people in such a way that they want to be a part of this. Let me see if Killian, I see you've got your hand up. Over to you.
Okay.
Yeah, just a quick question about the donut thing and how you reconcile that. The issue for me with both donut and the SDGs is the same one. It sets economy as equal to those other parts, right? Whereas economy should be seen as a subset, right? Which I think most people would agree with that. And so that's a problem, because when people who don't understand regenerative systems see that, I think they see it as it's presented to them. And so is there an awareness of that issue, first of all, that you try to communicate? And two, is there some like a step plan or like a process by which at some point that will be resolved by further transition of the system to a non-economic system or a whether it be a common, whatever, is that just, how is that fitting into your thinking?
Okay, good. So our goal isn't to change the economic system. We know we can't do that. We meet the system where it is. We find the people in those different parts of the system who want to play a role at transitioning the system or creating new ways of working. A lot of people who came to the donut sessions recognized that our biosphere is in a very perilous place, that we need to be able to understand that our economy is driving a lot of the breakdown that we see happening around us, and to understand that everything is impacted by economic action. We wanted people to see that how you choose to spend your money in the local shop has an impact on the economy. And we wanted people to understand also that they were able to, in a sense, kind of think with different parts of their brain about, if I take this economic decision, what impact is it going to have over here, for instance, on biodiversity? So I'm not sure that's really answering your question, except that our strategy was always to understand the different roles that people play in Devon, and you could say you could locate those Devon people in different parts of the donut, and then to help them see that they were part of a whole. They're part of a whole place, but they're part of a whole community, and they were all in some way connected. And the connective process that we ran reinforced that sense that we were working together towards a shared goal.
Yeah, that's all wonderful, and I understand, starting where you are and meeting people where they are, and you have to start from where you are, obviously, and what you have now. I was trying to get at in the long-term planning aspect, whether there's an awareness of or a desire or some long-term thing that to move away from economics, kind of as we know it today. I didn't say that clearly. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Killian. I would say more that we don't feel that we need to do anything about the economy. The economy is not going to survive in its current state for much longer, we don't think. The most important thing is to build a connection and relationship. And if you've got connection and relationship, you can face almost anything that comes over the horizon. It doesn't matter what it is, but you're prepared and you're able to exchange information and resource. That's more our strategy. It's kind of like slightly under the radar strategy. So there's also some questions. Yeah, Oscar.
I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, please do. Fantastic.
Like Tony asked, how do engage with people who really don't want to engage but are essential to replace evolution? And Melina asks how to conciliate the big polarization we have now in so many places and the authority dominance present in bioregions. And even I'm going to try, if I can, to link it with Tricia that says, what do we mean by governance? How do we allow our focus expand into grassroots, non-platform voices to be heard, and research with ways to develop and employ more regenerative governance, civic level, on the non-institutional level? One of the ways, like we did 16 dialogue spaces that more than 600 people participated, and then we engaged 10,000 more in different spaces. We did that by, like, I think there's two main things that we need to work on at bioregional level. One is legitimacy, and the other one, it's sorry, legitimacy, and I forgot about the other one. It's gonna come. Then when we're working on legitimacy, we have to build, if we want to move mountains in the future, we start by moving stones in the present. Then what we do, it's following John Paul Lederach, that it's a guy that is really known in the mediation and conflict works. And we use the critical east approach. We grab the different voices of the community that are present, then the grassroots needs to be present. And that means that we're generating in a really small space, 12, 14 people maximum, the conflict that is present in the bioregion itself. Then in that space, we actually generate conflict, but in a really safe way. And we can have like the companies and the activists and the politicians and the unions and the feminism, like try to have and the different cultural backgrounds and put them together in a place. Once we got to a reconciliatory place in there, we have a voice. We have a voice that is reconciled already, and that voice is the one we use to communicate the process and to actually start moving towards going to the critical mass, no? From the critical east to the critical mass. But using the voice of the people that have been there and that already reconciled the different conflicts that are in the community and in the bioregion. And the second thing, sorry, it's legitimacy and a deep capacity of reconciliation. Like when you have, like, I think that one of the really important things is that you have to really embed in yourself the sense of community. And there's all the voices, all of them are needed. The companies, the politicians, right wing, and if you put it to the extreme, the racists, that voice can also be regenerated. It needs a lot of calm and peace, but if we also we want to generate a community process that is capable of evolving, we have to listen all of them from a place that it's quite empty of judgment. And when someone has a really strong voice, we bring the other side and we don't react to that voice, right? It's like if a company says, we need its progress, it's like, great, we need progress, awesome, let's go for progress. But I have another voice here that says something a bit different, and that says that what you're doing, it's not progress. Can we hear that voice? And then an activist can come and be like, what you're bringing, it's not progress, but because what you're bringing, it's precarity and blah, blah, blah. It's like, interesting. What do you think about that? No, what do you think about your progress? Could you reconcile with that voice? Like bringing the meta framework of regeneration at the back, like reconciling these voices and really being capable of understanding that all of them are needed. And in terms of Tricia, that we're asking how to bring the grassroots in here and what do we mean by governance, it's trying to decentralize governance. What we're trying to do with this, it's to be able that if we have a strategy that it consents by most of the people or a big part of the people or critical mass of the people of the community, then we have a specific goals. If we have a specific goals, there's no need for a politician to tell us where we need to go. Then, and if we have that, what we have is the possibility of creating hubs that are the most inclusive possible, where everyone is capable of give their work and their resources and to take that, the information that is in those hubs, the data, and implement it in a completely decentralized way. Then here, it's when the grassroots are capable of actually entering and really engaging in the process. And the governance, it's understood as something complex, completely decentralized in the bioregion, that there's no control, that it's happening all the time at different levels, and no one has the full picture of it. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yes, that's good. Did that make sense to everybody? Great. Let me just see if there's more questions in the chat. Jesse, you're asking, is an effort to map and network the regionally scattered regen groups and individuals? Well, yes. There certainly is in Europe. We've got a meeting coming up in Mallorca starting on Saturday. So that is happening. I'm sure they could be better connected, but we're going to be talking about how we possibly work together. Tony, you're going to be there, aren't you? Yeah, great. And Oscar will be there too. Yeah. So we could take a couple more questions before we go into our break. If anybody has another question. Paula, I'm curious how focusing on potential and unleashing the potential is reconciled with collapse awareness. So my answer to that, and Oscar I'm sure has an answer as well, is that I find myself oscillating between collapse awareness and focusing on potential. It seems to be the story of my life at the moment. That on the one hand, there's a realization of what's happening with geosystems and how they're breaking down, what the impact of that will be on our economies, our societies, our bioregions, our natural systems. And on the other, there is always potential to work into. There's always the sense that we can learn from this. And as I've said before, bioregioning is a relational practice. So to me, getting into relationship with what is, listening to the music of what is one of the key practices. They're getting very real about what's happening. And if you're able to get very real about it and be in relationship to these huge geosystems or whatever you see happening in your local place without feeling you've got to fix it or put it right, there is always some aspect of potential that you can then find and work into. Oscar, what would you say to that one?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like entering in bioregion means letting go of control and really entering in complexity, and that there's no single, not like that. There's not going to be anyone, not even the people that wants to catalyze this type of change, capable of seeing where the things are going, and it's going to be emerging the whole time. Then I think it's really entering in complexity and being able to work from there. I don't know if that was helpful, but Laurent has the hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Oscar, and thanks, Isabel, for very engaging sessions with two quite distinct but connected examples. It's great. My question is about more the kind of the monitoring, evaluation, and learning practice that you have at a bioregional level. I was yesterday in a session that talked a bit about that. That's kind of my area of work, and I wonder what kind of experience you've got with that, particularly while you've referenced the donut model. How easy, how challenging, what are the questions that are raising at the moment for you guys in terms of being able to monitor and to understand how well those bioregions are faring against the objectives that you have for the development? Thank you.
One of our goals for the work that we're developing together, that Oscar and I are developing together, is this capacity to be able to monitor and evaluate what regenerative practices result in. So how do you know your regenerative practice is working? Because the current monitoring and evaluation methods that we have mainly don't embrace the whole mindset of regeneration. So you're looking for different indicators if you're regenerating something. So that's kind of work in progress, really. But to frame everything as action inquiry is what we do the whole time. So we say that we're constantly learning, and this capacity to learn and adapt faster than the rate of climate change is, we feel, one of the core capacities that we need to help our bioregions develop. So to work on projects in our bioregion in which there are many different players, many actors who come in and work together and learn on the job, for us is incredibly important, partly because that builds relationship and it builds a sense of agency as well. So we're going to pause, Killian, we're going to stop now for our 10-minute break, or actually 8-minute break, if that's all right. And when you come back, we're going to put in the chat the link to our mural, and we're going then to talk you through the framework that we've developed for kind of thinking through the complexity of how you would bring many stakeholders in a bioregion into this discussion, really, about landscape scale governance. Oscar, is there anything else we want people to think about while they're off getting a cup of tea or taking a breath outside in the open air?
No, that in the next, when we're sharing the model, it's a model that is a better version than, and it's the first time that I think we're kind of releasing it out of the bioregions. Then I think it's a really interesting reciprocal situation here. You guys can have what Isabel and me have been working for several years in the experience of applying things, and we can have the feedback of many regenerative minds that can help us see if there's places where we could improve the process. Then I would really like if we could the conversation could go towards that.
Okay, that's great. So we'll see you at the top of the hour.
Should I play some music?
So Ben, you've resumed the main English recording, is that right?
I didn't do anything. So I think the main recording is just, whatever the audio is in the main room, and somebody's got it going on the
Okay, good.
cloud recording is definitely
It said the
activated.
recording was paused, but now it's no longer paused, which is great, what we want.
Right. Or it may have started up again as a separate one, I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay, good. Melina, thank you very much. Come back in, everybody. We're going to start. Trisha, you could bring it up. I wonder why. What are you on? Are you on an iPad?
I am on an iPad.
Because sometimes iPads are problematic. So yes, we can share the screen. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
The only thing that does get problematic this way is that you won't be able to post any, put any post-it notes into the framework. But if you want to write things in the chat, when we get to the various different stages, I can certainly transfer them across to post-it notes for you. So, is everybody in the mural? Let me see. Oscar, do you want to start us off by giving us the kind of general layout and framework of the mural?
Okay. Then, yeah, the idea of this is the 8 phases of value adding process that was taught by the Genesis group, and that we changed it, to adapt it to a bioregional work. The idea of it is that there's like these meta patterns that are these 8 meta patterns that each one could fit other patterns inside, but those patterns should be able to guide a company regenerative process into a bioregion. And they're all linked on each other, and the ending, like the outcome of it, it's the capability of deciding, monitoring, implementing, evaluating, and regenerating a bioregional process that it's able to fit mass decentralized governance structure. And one thing that was in the chat also that I wanted to just, at least in my experience, working with, in our case, SDGs, not donut economics, or it's a way of actually engaging different type of actors through legitimacy. Like if you try to start by generating a really complex regenerative system, many people will not trust the approach, and it's going to be really difficult. But if you take something that it's more or less universal and that has a certain legitimacy and authority, then you're capable of talking to political authorities from a different approach, because you're asking them to actually be follow, and in our case, a United Nations consensus. And from there, we can regenerate anything. Like then if we have problems with the SDGs, or the SDGs are not enough the framework that we need, it doesn't really matter, because we can regenerate that too. We can change the structure, we can adapt the structure, and we can move from there. But the most important thing is actually bringing the people together. Then I don't know, Isabel, would you like to start? I think one of the things of this framework is that you can start in any of the points, just the one that is more available to you.
I think we'll start with diagnosis. So diagnosis is the stage which is on the left-hand side above nourishing. So as you can see, it's a circular process. So many of these regenerative frameworks, probably actually all of them, offer up an understanding of a dynamic process that keeps feeding back into itself. So it's a process, as Oscar says, you can step in many ways, and you can follow it through in a cycle which keeps on going. But one of the benefits of presenting it in this way, or enabling people to think in this way, is that you can be at any stage in the process and you can find a way in, and you can see how the different parts of the process relate to each other. So we're going to start with diagnosis. So I'm going to just zoom out a little bit here so people can see on the screen share what the diagnosis step says. So we've talked quite a lot already in the summit about seeing systems and seeing the bioregion whole, and being able to also see overlapping systems within the bioregion and how they connect. And I've talked also about fracture points, and fracture points are often acupuncture points as well. So where something is breaking down, for instance, if climate change means we've got less fresh water available, and this is really going to impact on how our reservoirs function and how people use water, that's a fracture point. And it's a good place to intervene, because there is a desire and urgency to intervene. And if you can find that intervention place, there's also a possibility to do what we call flip the system. Now, flipping systems towards regeneration is introducing ideas at that point of stress or crisis into conversations where you have many different actors or stakeholders. In the case of water, which is what we've worked in quite a lot recently, it's getting the users of the system, i.e. the consumers of the water. We prefer them to think of themselves as stewards of the water, but a lot of the time they're still stewards of the water. And you get the water company, and you get people who have a vested interest in your local river from which your water is abstracted together in one place, and you have a bigger conversation to understand how all these different parts of the system function, and how in fact there is a shared goal. So the shared goal is, how do we both preserve the well-being of our rivers and the aquatic life in our river, and also work towards this goal of everybody having enough water. So that would be a kind of a way in, that's an acupuncture point. And if you can find that way in, and you can get people to think about how they can repurpose their roles to be more regenerative, and more joined up and connected, then you're kind of moving that system in the right direction. And also, if you can get people to understand how water goes everywhere, it connects up every aspect of our lives, you're again taking people into that systemic way of thinking.
I would add one thing, that it's the fracture points are like normally are the places where you find conflict, and the places that you find conflict in a community or in a bioregion means that there's a lot of energy, there's high energy on those points. Then it's a really good way to start. You really have to be able to manage conflict, but you know that a lot of people will come because there's conflict, and that means that people it's really engaged on that process. If you start with something that people it's not worried about it, and it's going to be much more difficult to be able to engage people on it.
That's very good. I agree. I'm not able to write on this post-it note. I wonder why. Maybe because I'm sharing my screen. That's interesting. I could create the note, but I couldn't write on it. So what I wanted to write here, maybe Oscar can do it, or somebody else can do it, is that there is conflict at these friction points, and that conflict is what releases the energy for regeneration. Is anyone able to get in and write on that little blue post-it?
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Oh, thank you. Any observations from anybody here in the room about how they've experienced those friction points?
Yes, could I add something?
Yeah, do.
Yeah. Yes, I'm kind of working around my local, very much a village level at the moment, and I'm really heartened to hear the suggestion around coming in at small scale and building up. However, the village in which I live has been split already around some very strongly held views, which have just caused really a poisoning of the atmosphere and almost inability, I think, for people to actually, the two sides to join together again. So I'm just wondering if anyone's had any experience of that, a similar situation, and how we might get people together, because literally we have a group of people who feed each other with their own stories about the others, the other side, as it were. Which really seems irreconcilable to me at the moment.
Would anyone like to give an answer to that?
I could say a word or two.
Yeah, do, Ben. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Sorry?
Jesse, have you been waiting to speak? Is that?
No? Ben, go ahead.
Sorry, Jesse, you froze, so maybe you want to turn off your video to get more bandwidth. I'm not sure. I was just going to very briefly say, I think the political divides, I think that's what you're alluding to, Tony, that also, go down to the level of just what is true, what is reality. We're quite fragmented, if not in sort of two main camps, but with lots of diversity across that too. How do we deal with that? How do we come together at the bioregional scale, or do anything transformational if that's going on? Huge question. Glad you asked it, and easy answers. But I was struck by the case made by Helen and Norberg Hodge of Local Futures in their film Planet Local that they released earlier this year, that working at the local scale actually is a way to bridge these divides, that when you get down to the community level at least, and I think arguably this should translate to the bioregional level, there are so many ways that we can find common ground around what we would like. We may disagree on what the political stuff is and a lot of other dimensions, but we maybe can still align at that scale. I'm eager to test that out. the film featured people mostly from what you would call the radical left even. So I think it's, anyway, but that seems to me one possibility.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I hear what you're saying on that. In this particular instance, it is very much a local issue. It's not a political one. It is about there were a group of us who were nominated to put together a community plan, which really sort of mapped out what we valued as a community and how it might evolve in the future, which is a particularly British planning device called neighbourhood plan. But there were some people there who then became very suspicious of the members of that group, feeling that they were there just to actually benefit from their landowning development potential. And then there were personality issues that came in. So it wasn't so much the politics of it with a big P. It was very much a local issue and personality issue. And I mean, that's, in a small community, that really does make a huge difference.
I think there are lots of processes and to work through those kinds of things. There's multiple fields that address that. So,
Trisha, you've got your hand up. You might be able to help Tony. You're still muted.
Yes.
You might need to turn your video off because your voice is a little bit wobbly and faint.
This is.
Try
Can
again.
you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
I'm on speaker. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, Trisha, go ahead. Maybe she's not hearing us. Can you hear us?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, when I'm feeling into these interests,
You faded away a bit.
Maybe you can write in the chat.
Yeah, Trisha, write in the chat. That would be the easiest thing.
yes,
Then we
I can
pick
hear
that
you.
up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but with difficulty. So we think you could write in the chat and we'll pick up your question from there. Great. I think we'll just keep on going. And we'll pick up questions as we go. So moving around to strategy.
Joao has his hand up.
Thank you, Oscar. Hello, everyone. Hello, Isabel. Yeah, I will just I have my community as an example, right? So we mapped a lot of artists and also bring them into work groups. I say us, right? And yeah, one thing that is difficult for us is because these working groups, they creating projects, when people are bringing together some idea for they can manifest, they manifest it, and then it's a new journey for bringing together new ideas and so on. But with this bioregional collective movement we call forum, because bring these voices together. These working groups was created because the governmental here, the government has dismobilized the culture. So we see that we had to have this representative location working groups to bring projects for the community, right? And we made a huge event by just mapping these artists. They was willing to make a huge celebration, and we take the opportunity to make a forum where they sit together and make get up the challenges and the potentials, and then was creating these working groups. And we are trying to create some governance methodology for bringing these projects as something that anyone can create a working group. But these working groups represents how I can say, it's agroecology, audiovisual, and therapists. It's healthy, and so they have this the class of each, that class, I mean, people that work in each, to bring these projects and work together, with the audiovisual, bring it with therapists. And this project, it has a huge potential, but for being possible for us to create this community forum as an organization that can bring professionals with artists to create projects, we need some fund to be a sustainable organization, and look to our own resources as human beings, and willing to cooperate. But many of them stick with the system of getting to be paid for their job, but many see the potential to working together, that this job can increase their own potential, to create projects that articulate themselves. But what we how I say, how we can, that it's far away. Just it's a long journey, right? We take this journey to taking, I forgot in English, sorry. But yeah. And
You can speak in Spanish, because Oscar can understand you in Spanish.
yeah, Portuguese maybe, but a colheita, quando being harvest, a colheita do que a gente ganha, what we yeah. But the main thing that I was reflecting, sorry to take it so long, it's that I myself see the opportunity to coordinate us by creating autonomy for each working group, and the virtual tools can help, but it's not possible to bring this impose this as a method for the whole assessing people that are want more to get together physically and creating projects. But these working groups that work by being possible for these projects has not incentives to create. It's just us. But how to, I see that we need a global support to really bring these ideas strong, some working groups locally that understand some of it to bring for their own. It's what, yeah, I'm feeling right now. But sorry, we'll pass it. I think I didn't make my point, but I can write here.
Oscar, do you want to answer that? And also we'll get across to working groups and how they function on the right-hand side of the graphic.
Yeah, maybe we can just keep going, and we take back the Joao's approach.
Yeah, I think we will cover it in a minute. Yeah.
Great.
So here we're at strategy. Miguel, I think you've been writing this note saying partners are nested in the system. Stepping inside the system seems as if they're not part of the system. I mean, the reality is most people don't think they're part of the system. But in order to kind of really see how systems work, to take them inside a system which is a life support system for them, whether it's their health system or water or food or anything like that, it does help them to think systemically and to see that what their role in the system is. So one of the things we're going to be working into through this framework is to understand that once you see your role in the system, you can find the agency that enables you to influence the system and to work with other people in the system. Oscar, is there anything else you want to say about the strategy post?
Yeah, that I think that for the strategy, I think it's the only point where we actually need a clear consensus that we need to take the things as generic and as inclusive as possible, and defining clear challenges that we want to work together, but meaning that the companies and the unions need to kind of agree in something, and that could be frustrating because it could become a bit generic, but there's always reconciliatory points that you can find out. And I think that also we wrote that to step inside the systems, because for example, in my region, there's like a huge meat industry that the only thing that it kind of has consumers around the world. It takes meat from around the world. It brings workers from around the world. Like it's part of a way bigger system. And the only thing that does to our system it's extraction, nothing else. I think when we're talking about that, it's more kind of the awareness of you are part of this system, even though you participate in other systems at higher scales, but being aware of that you're part of the systems means that you need to be aware that your externalities affect your system in a deep way.
That's very good. Okay, let's move on to articulation. I'm just going to keep writing some notes here on the mural, Oscar. If you'd like to introduce people into articulation, I'll come and jump in.
Sure. In our case, we did, like, as I said, 21, defined 21 challenges: culture, health, education, like, you know, everything more or less in a generic way that could affect the bioregion, or that the people from the bioregion was actually worried about. That means that we need, in our case, we need to articulate 21 municipalities with 21 sectors. Even if you just you want to generate an articulation only with 21 municipalities in 21 sectors, and it's much more complex than that, you get really easy to 400, right? Then the complexity of the system, it's really, really high. And we are in a small bioregion of 60,000 people. Then we need, and this is, in our case, this is what we're designing right now. And Joao was saying that there's digital platforms are not enough, and I agree. But I think they're needed. Like we need to be able to generate this enough complexity for the people to be able to know where to go to talk about whether they wanted to talk and to bring what they wanted to bring. And most, like in the tables that we did, that 600 people came, there was tons of people that said, I have no idea about ecology, but I'm really worried about the crisis that we're facing. And what I need is someone to tell me what I need to do. Like tons of people like that. And they don't want to get really deep in understanding the system, how it works, but they're totally open to trust a group of people, a specialist or whatever, that tell them this is how the system works. And the most important thing that we need to do is this. Then if we're capable of articulating that, tons of people are going to be capable, as Patricia was saying, how to engage grassroots. Sometimes if we just point out, in this point, we're going to be talking about this specific thing, and we're going to be articulating the implementation of an action to be able to deal with it. That it's really, really helpful.
And articulation is also about seeing the biggest picture. So if you can see the biggest picture, it creates the biggest framing. And it enables many different players to come together for envisioning a shared goal. So the biggest picture could be climate change. The biggest picture could be shifts in the global economy, or the biggest picture could be the need to change from global food sourcing to localized food sourcing. So finding that shared concern, which is really big, but really visceral, so it's also personal, is, I think, the key to articulation. And certainly in South Devon, our experience of articulation is also about articulating how this place in the past dealt with challenges, with really existential challenges. And if you can find ways in which the people of the past overcame existential challenges, wherever they might have come from, they could be ecological challenges or challenges to do with governance, power, whatever, land ownership. That in itself is an enormous impetus to believing that you can deal with this once again. You can find the energy once again in this place, inspired by what happened before, to find meaning and purpose in what you're doing, and to create a strategy for overcoming the difficulties that you see. So I see we've got a couple of questions up. So Joao, would you like to go first, and then Melina?
I can be quickly. Yeah, one example that we faced it was that the cultural secretary, they saw us as a huge example for the whole municipal, the whole state of, how to emerge artists together and so on. And we was called to help this city body festival, So we made this with our map. We bring to them to value the local artists and creating projects with these events, bringing the ideas to happen. And we paint a wall that was decorated in the city and did these projects. But all this was made, the whole event, project was made by me and one people, and we was not receiving any money for it. Was a totally voluntary work to create, and we saw that the potential, because we had the association of citizens in the local. They also help us. We help them, so we create more connections with citizens and livings, but people in our organization, cultural, are not capable to understand these goals as more than they are maybe tired, to work so much and so. But yeah, we need some. I love this framework, because it's kind of what we need to see as now, and taking more overview for a whole, because we go into a project and we go deep there, and we have to remember this regenerative framework, as I agree with Oscar. But yeah, it's a working that needs support to be solidified, So passionate.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. So here in South Devon, we bring artists and climate scientists and business and communities and data and many other things all together in one place to create something that everybody can work into together. So that in itself kind of has a very special value to it. And I think if you can create that kind of collaboration, it's easier to get funding for it. And also if you can kind of demonstrate how you're creating a win for addressing the problem that you're all looking at together, again, I think it's easier to get resource in that way. So, Melina, over to you.
Thank you both. I would like to share something that maybe is inspiring for other people, and it is a little bit of my experiences in Colombia, where we had a very hard armed conflict And what I have observed in those contexts is tapping something that it is really, really important, and is the humanity of every actor in a territory, and to be able to hold that space of these people, armed people or victims, as humans is, I think that it is one of the big lessons we have from Colombia, in Colombia. And even for reconciliation processes between paramilitaries and guerrilla and victims and government and everybody, is like we are all humans. So I think that a big part of any work in complex systems is to be able to be in touch with our own humanity and our own weakness and our own capability of accepting the vulnerability we hold in ourselves, and grow in this capability of being vulnerable, because that is really powerful. That had breached many huge, like abysses between people. And I just wanted to bring that, and I am feeling right now like a vibration in my body, in my stomach and heart, because I am kind of connecting with those experiences I have had. And I know that Oscar also went to Colombia and experienced this kind of environment. But what we really, what I want to bring here is that there is one part of the mind that wants to understand everything. And that understanding is like to control everything at a very deep level of our consciousness. So to navigate complexity, it is just something that, like touch our guts, and we need to really be able to accept deeply that we cannot control, that we can be vulnerable. And that is very, very powerful. And I just wanted to put it in the table, because I think that for many complex systems, we forget very easily to be vulnerable. So just go with that. Thanks.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much for that. Michael, we're going to keep going on to the next stage and then pick up your question when we get there, if that's okay. So the next stage we're going to look at is implementation. So that's about how you establish roles for flipping the fracture points in systems and landscapes in order to enable adaptation. So certainly at Bioregional Learning Centre here in South Devon, we didn't used to talk about adaptation. It happened over the summer when we had the experience of an extremely hot, dry summer and seeing our river dwindle to almost nothing, and recognizing that we were not really in the territory of climate mitigation any longer, but the territory of adaptation. And the whole notion of core team, field teams, and task teams also comes from Regenesis. The idea that there's a core team that kind of holds all the work together in a bioregion, but there are many different projects in that region. And you've got field teams who are experts at those particular, in those domains or those sectors, whether it's farming or health or whatever it might be. And they put together the task teams that go out there and actually take action. So I have to say, this is our goal. We haven't yet managed to achieve that, but it makes an awful lot of sense to me to be able to organize in that way, in a kind of disaggregated, decentralized, autonomous organization way. But Oscar may have some more to add to that. Oscar, is there more you want to say about implementation?
We're applying it to not to the whole bioregion, but to specific municipalities. We're creating town councils where people it's capable of managing information. We do it from the perspective of sociocracy 3.0. It's because it's highly adaptable and systemic, and we can change it and adapt it to the different needs, and to train the people and give them capacities to be able to manage this kind of complexity that in a town it's not that complex and it's way easier. And this way we're trying to create a decentralized structure that at the point it's working pretty well, but we haven't tried at bioregional level because the complexity is higher and we haven't got to that point yet.
But we think in order to get to that point, we need to go down here to the lower part of the cycle. Yeah, Oscar, talk about monitoring.
No, that Killian was saying that it's hierarchical. Well, it's not. The idea in sociocracy 3.0 is that you actually have a hub. You need a hub that is capable of coordinating and letting all the information flow. That it's a must. You need to have that, because if not, you're going to have fragmentation. And okay, but well, actually, it's not. But and what you need to do is to make sure that the decisions are not made at the place where the whole information it's shared. Like if you have a coordination place, we haven't worked at bioregion, as I said, and I don't know how we're going to do it there. But in a town, you need a place where the whole information goes, and then decentralize the decision making, and then you make sure that there's no hierarchy. But I completely agree with you, Killian, that there's you have to put a lot of attention into it to make sure that it's not hierarchical. And it's difficult because people tend, when you have the information, to make the decisions. Then you have to separate who's sharing the information and who's making the decisions. And that way you don't have a hierarchical organization. It's working.
Okay, so to talk about monitoring. So why do we need monitoring? Killian, we'll come back to you if we may. Well, we've just done this bottom loop, and then we'll kind of pick up all the comments then. Collecting and sharing cold as well as warm data, know-how, models, and expertise in an easy to access knowledge commons that serve civil society. So this is a particularly relevance to climate adaptation, knowing that it's not going to be possible for governments or big business or whatever else, academia, to solve all these issues for us, that civil society needs to be involved. And civil society at the moment does not have access to the knowledge, to the data. It's not able to share know-how. For instance, if anyone went to a scientific conference, they would not be able to access the papers that the people at the conference were talking about because they'd be behind paywalls, and they may not even understand in the way in which the papers are written anyway. So how do we make all this knowledge about climate change, and I'm just talking about climate change in particular, but it doesn't have to be just that. It could be about biodiversity or anything else. How do we make that accessible so that people can really understand what's going on in an age of fake news, where people don't take the time to look at data? They often don't know how to interpret data. So, I mean, that's a huge challenge. It's a question for us. We're not really ready to answer that question. We just know that it's needed. But at the monitoring level, we do have citizen science, and we do have the capacity, for instance, here in South Devon, for local people to take on a section of the river and to become citizen scientists on their river and share all that information on a website, so that it's very easy to spot where pollution is coming from, and it's then easier to take action. That's a kind of tiny example, but this monitoring could be almost about anything. Oscar, do you want to say more about the monitoring?
Yeah, just a bit. In the sense of in our case, we took the strategy, the challenges defined at the strategy level, and from there we actually created a set of indicators that now it's reaching over 1,000 indicators. And now our challenge is to be able how to monitor that and to actually open it up to the population for them to be able to sense and participate in the analysis of it. Then, and in that sense, what I actually wanted to kind of emphasize, because you, Michael, were saying like, This is kind of a reductionist approach. I would agree if it would be cyclic, but in this case, it's not really cyclic. Because monitoring is related to diagnosis, like each one of them is related to the other 7. Then when you have a strategy, with a strategy, you're capable of defining the indicators. With diagnosis, you're capable of finding where are the fracture points and therefore the leverage points that are most important in the monitoring. With the articulation, you know which are the actors that are capable of acting on the things that you're analyzing. And each one of them is related to all the others. And therefore this is actually a complex system, not reductionist in that sense.
So if you're able to, I'm not going to put this in the chat because I have got too much up on my screen, but if you go to www.devondonut.org, you will be able to get into the interactive donut and see what the indicators are for each sector of the donut and the pathways to action. So the monitoring that we devised for the donut and the way of understanding how the scenarios were playing out and what the impact of action was on the scenarios was we devised indicators together with the Devon Donut Collective. So it was a kind of crowdsourced understanding of what the most useful indicators could be. And we deliberately made them very easy to monitor and to measure. Jesse, I see your hand up, but we'll come to you, if we may, at the end of doing the bottom loop, and we'll pick up all the questions then. But
yeah, I have to go and prepare for the next session. I put something in the chat.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We'll pick it up. We just want to make sure that we've only got about 12 minutes left, that we cover this bottom part of the diagram. So evaluation. Evaluation is a tricky subject in the sense of kind of who does the evaluating, what are we evaluating? We want to make it possible for people in communities on the land to themselves set the parameters for what is being evaluated and to understand how they themselves can evaluate it. Even if it's as simple as understanding how many swallows are returning to the barn on the farm each year, or as simple as understanding what's happening at the food bank, how many families are now using the local food bank, whether it's things like that, or things that are much more complex to understand, which you need to use cold data for. Oscar, would you like to say more about evaluation?
In our case, at this point, what we're doing is trying to actually follow the lead of Isabel's, and we're trying to bring some technical people, but from public administration companies, grassroots, but people with capacity of analysis, to an open technical backroom that can grab all the information from the monitoring system and being able to translate it in a way that can be warm up, that data can be warm up, and then throw it back to the general public.
Yeah, keep going, and I will put the link to the Devon Donut in the chat.
Okay, then in the regeneration stage, measuring success in terms of regeneration and of life itself, vitality, viability, capacity to evolve. We haven't reached there, but the idea of that stage is that it's not only about evolving the outcome of the analysis that we got in evaluation. It's about evolving the whole thing. It's about evolving the articulation, the implementation. It's about evolving the 8 phases itself. It's about evolving the whole thing as nested systems. You have to look at all the different levels of the process that is going on and be able to regenerate them all in each cycle that you're doing. Because if you only regenerate the analysis of the outcome, then you're stuck in a rigid organization. And sorry, Killian, I agree with you with what you said in the chat. There is hierarchy. What we're trying to do, and in this case, and there's a risk, I agree with you. And then what you're trying to do is to work at polycentric hierarchy, right? That you don't have a hierarchy that is capable of defining a way, but you have different hierarchies working at the same time, and there's still a risk, and that's why regeneration here is really important, because you should be able, if you find that that's not working properly, you should be able to modify it for the next round. And around it's not really, because most of the things are happening at the same time, but to kind of understand.
So we're excited to develop a monitoring system that can measure vitality, viability, and capacity to evolve. And in South Devon, one of the ways in which we want to measure that is through the ability of communities to learn and adapt and find a way through, and the kind of resource that's needed for that. And of course, the impact on life itself, the impact on bioregions can also now be measured from outer space. So if you're looking at the amount of green, for instance, on a landscape, you can measure that with satellites. So there are lots of different ways in which you can measure now. You can measure from looking what's happening on the ground, but you can also measure from way further out. So mapping is taking all the outcomes, or all the realizations that you achieve through doing this monitoring and evaluation, and feeding it back into the ongoing action. So the top half of this diagram is about the actions, and the bottom half is about the monitoring and evaluation. So it's a circular process. And while you're obviously trying to map success, because you want to be able to prove that what you're doing is working, it's just as important to learn from your mistakes and see what isn't working. And again, it goes back to this capacity of civil society. So pathways to action set out as they are in the Devon Donut is one way to keep people on track, or to keep the whole project on track. To think about this pathway to action was intended to shift the needle on that particular scenario in that particular domain. There's also a need, of course, to have a map that joins it all up, and so you can see it all in one place, which is the function of the hub that we've been talking about. So that may seem like a quite hierarchical approach, but I think you do need a place where everything is collected up and then redistributed out. It's almost like having an old-fashioned telephone exchange, kind of, so different parts of the system can speak to each other, and there's somebody at the center, or a team at the center, that enabling that, all that connection to happen.
Yeah, I think also that an important thing of mapping is that this is where you evolve the story of place, no? It's like in the case that was coming here up, no? The governance, if it's too hierarchical or not. And then you could be like, well, we have this problem in this place that it's related to that the governance structure, it's too rigid and it's not flowing enough. Then we like warming up that data, no? Like we know how the thing works, we know the analysis that we have, and now we bring it up to evolving the story of place of our bioregion, and that's the mapping. And this, because most of the people are not going to be capable of understanding cold data analysis. And it's going to be useless for most of the people in the bioregion. But if we can convert it in something that it's narrative, then we can take that back in a collective way. I'm not meaning that this should be something completely participatory, and then you can take that back to the rest of the community, not as a consensus, but as a narrative that can keep evolving the process.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes for answering questions. I'm so sorry, this has really flown past. So if anyone would like a question answered, please put your hand up. Yeah, Killian, go ahead.
Hi, I have a couple, but the most important one for me is the scalability one that I raised earlier. There's the issue, multiple issues. One is just sheer resources, and that means material, means human beings to do this stuff. But maybe the biggest limiting factor is time. And I just don't see how this gets global in all these different bioregions, some that have virtually no resources at all, and getting people trained up to do the measuring, all these different, I am having a hard time seeing how this, I mean, it's a cool idea. I mean, it's a great idea, but so are electric cars, right? There are lots of cool ideas out there, but not all of them are going to be as workable as we hope. I just have trouble seeing this scaling. And so maybe you can help me understand that a little bit.
Well, we're not making an attempt to scale. We're making an attempt to trial this in a few places to see if it works or not. And rather than scaling up, we'd want to scale out and share that learning with other places. So we think, the hard part is doing it from the beginning. The heavy lifting is the people who kind of pioneer this from the very beginning, it never really having been done before, although I'm sure there are other places we can learn from. So I don't know if that answers your question, but certainly one of the ambitions of this summit is to draw attention to the potential of working at bioregional scale and to bring more funding into doing that and to kind of package up all these kind of different possibilities or initiatives that funders might want to invest in and be able to articulate what the outcomes would be from making those investments.
Right. Well, where I said scale up, you said scale out. Same. That's what I meant. I mean, that's just a language issue. But that is the issue. And it's wonderful. I love that you're doing the chunk thing. I absolutely support that you're doing this testing and everything first. Absolutely. But I do see an issue of if you go, hey, this works, I still see a big problem with that is spreading it out. So I don't know if you.
Yeah, I would add to what Isabel was saying, like, at this point, the Catalan government, it's generated like a program that it called 6+1. The one is us, and the other 6 is going to be other bioregions in Catalonia that are going to be following the path. The first thing we told them is like, there's nothing to follow. Like everything that you're going to have, it's going to be completely different from our reality. And we can share some patterns that we used, and we can share that and see if you can fit your patterns in that structure. And from there, we'll see and generate a dialogue. I think it's about generating translocal dialogues. Like with Melina, we're kind of talking about seeing if this could, how something like this could actually fit in rural Colombia. And I'm sure that like Colombia has tons of amazing community patterns that we could learn a lot of it from it. And I think it's more about generating a dialogue. It's a frame to dialogue about community and bioregional processes, but I don't think it's anything to be actually be extrapolated in other places, you know what I mean?
I do, but the problem is we see it time after time, and that someone has an idea like this, and when you set it out with so much structure and everything, what tends to happen is people without expertise will just take that and say, okay, yeah, and they will cookie cutter it, even if you tell them not to. So that's one of the dangers, which I'm sure you of course you know.
Yeah, thank you.
Completely.
Michael, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up.
Thank you. So I want to apologize for leading with critical observations, because it might have left an impression that was in fact what was most important of what was going on here. And it can be demoralizing and deflating. And so I would first like to say that what I was most moved by was who you're being in the world, someone taking a stand, someone showing up, someone practicing and living out loud in a way that kind of is just energizing and beautiful. And so I really like to start there. And this is why when I jumped in to say, oh, it was intended as a contribution rather than a diminishment.
Yeah, thank you.
Where one of the struggles that I have both in and one of the things that I do is try and extend the science of happiness into practice. And so sometimes I get caught in scientific and descriptions of models that do not convey the experience of flourishing and joy that is in fact, one thing is the the book knowledge about something, and the other is the experience of it. And that's where we can get lost. And so the very act that you are inviting a relationship to the land and to grow an experience of aliveness that is greater than what people understand. You know, I don't know when Oscar said Catalonia, or well, I can't recall how he said it. I thought of this guy, this famous Catalan bard who says, "Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar." Basically, he's like, there is no path. You see the path when you look back that you've walked, but you'll never walk it again. And there is a creative thing that is going on here, that these maps only go so far, and that who you're being in inviting us into this rapport with you is you are infecting me with ideas, even if I'm kind of saying, well, what about? And I just want to thank you for holding the light up. So I know that was not a question.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's a beautiful way to end this session.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope to see you in future days in the summit. We've still got 3 days left. Or maybe you even be on the summit this evening as well. Hey, Anthony, good to see you. Oscar, is there anything you want to say in closing?
Yes, that I thank you everyone for all the feedbacks, and that it's actually really helpful, because I think the awakening that I'm taking from this is that it does sometimes, when you work in these kind of things, you try to think universally, and even though we all know that it's not possible, but sometimes you try to be like, this would work for everyone. It's like, obviously you have no idea. Then like the awakening of this is like a dialogue. It's a process that we need to it's talking about intangible things. And it's like a start to be able to talk about bioregions, to change in as much as necessary, hack it and whatever it is that need to happen. But I thank you for that, because it's, yeah, an awakening call on that, and it's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for sticking with it. Thank you for all your feedback, really helpful to us. This work will continue to evolve. We don't quite know how. It's been going on for these 2 years. I'm sure it's got a long way to go, but we'll keep you posted. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.